She opened her eyes to silk. Pure white silk sheets that probably cost more than her entire month's rent. Yuna's head pounded as she tried to remember how she got here. The room around her was massive, decorated with abstract art that screamed money, the kind of art you see in magazines about billionaires. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the glittering Seoul skyline, and she realized with growing panic that she was very, very high up. Her heart started racing. This wasn't her cramped studio apartment in Hongdae. This wasn't anywhere she recognized. The door opened. A man walked in, tall, wearing an expensive black suit that fit him like it was custom-made, which it probably was. His face was cold, handsome in a dangerous way, with eyes that looked like they'd seen things most people only had nightmares about. He moved with the confidence of someone who owned everything he touched. He looked at her, and the smallest hint of something crossed his face. Relief? Possession? She couldn't tell. Then he spoke, his voice low and measured. "You're awake. Good. We need to talk about why you can't leave." Yuna's blood turned to ice. But to understand how a 26-year-old nurse ended up trapped in a mansion with a man she'd never met, we need to go back. Back to 48 hours earlier, when her biggest problem was just trying to survive another shift. Yuna had been on her feet for 12 hours straight. 12 brutal hours at Seoul General Hospital, dealing with emergencies, cranky patients, and a supervisor who seemed to think nurses didn't need bathroom breaks. Her scrubs were wrinkled. There was a coffee stain on her jacket she didn't remember getting, and her feet ached in her worn-out sneakers that desperately needed replacing. But she couldn't afford new shoes. Not when her bank account was hovering dangerously close to empty. Not when her mother was sick in Busan, depending on the money Yuna sent home every month. Not when she was still drowning in student debt from nursing school, debt that felt like it would follow her to her grave. She was 26 years old and exhausted in a way that went deeper than just physical tiredness. 3 months ago, she'd caught her boyfriend cheating. 3 months ago, she'd walked away from that relationship and told herself she was better off alone. Most days, she believed it. It was 2 a.m. when she finally clocked out. The night air hit her face, cool and slightly damp. Then the rain started. Of course. Of course she'd forgotten her umbrella. Yuna pulled her thin jacket tighter and started walking. The streets of Seoul at 2 a.m. were a strange mix of dangerous and empty. She kept her earbuds in, not because she was listening to anything, but because it discouraged strangers from talking to her. Her hand stayed close to the pepper spray in her pocket, the one her friend had insisted she carry. She stopped at the 24-hour convenience store on the corner. The same one she always stopped at. The older woman behind the counter smiled at her, the same woman who always gave her extra napkins with her cup ramen, like she knew Yuna needed those small kindnesses to get through the day. While the water boiled for her noodles, Yuna checked her bank account on her phone. The number that popped up made her want to cry. After sending money to her mother, after paying rent, after buying the bare minimum to survive, she had almost nothing left. She had a small scar on her left hand from a kitchen accident when she was a child. Sometimes, when she was stressed, she'd rub that scar without thinking. She was rubbing it now. The ramen was cheap, hot, and exactly what she needed. She ate it standing up outside the store, under the small awning that barely protected her from the rain. Then she made a decision that would change everything. She decided to take the shortcut. There was an alley, narrow and dark, that would save her 5 minutes of walking in the rain. 5 minutes didn't sound like much, but when you were exhausted and wet and just wanted to collapse into bed, 5 minutes felt like everything. Yuna turned into the alley. That's when she heard it. A sound that made her nurse instincts flare to life immediately. Groaning. Someone was in pain. She should have kept walking. She should have called the police and let them handle it. That's what any smart person would do at 2 a.m. in a dark alley in Seoul. But Yuna wasn't built that way. She followed the sound to behind the dumpsters. What she found made her gasp. A man lay collapsed on the wet pavement, blood pooling around him, mixing with the rain. So much blood. His suit was torn and expensive, the kind of suit that cost more than she made in 6 months. A designer watch still gleamed on his wrist, so whoever had done this to him hadn't been after robbery. She could see 2 wounds. A gunshot to the shoulder. a stab wound to his side, both bleeding heavily. His face was partially covered in blood and rain, but she could tell he was young, maybe 30. And he was dying. Yuna's training kicked in before her common sense could stop her. She dropped to her knees, ignoring the cold water soaking through her scrubs, and checked for a pulse.
Weak. Thready. But there.
Then his hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused but desperate. His lips moved, and she had to lean close to hear him over the rain. Don't call police. They'll finish me. Every alarm bell in Yuna's head started screaming. This wasn't a random mugging. This was something else. Something dangerous. She should run.
She should run right now.
But he was dying. Her hands moved on their own, years of nursing training overriding her fear. She pressed down hard on the gunshot wound, feeling warm blood pulse against her palms. She unwrapped her scarf, the cheap one she'd bought at a street market, and used it as a makeshift bandage. He faded in and out of consciousness, muttering something in English she couldn't quite catch. His breathing was getting shallower. Then she heard it. The sound of a car engine. Heavy and powerful. Headlights flooded the alley, and a black SUV screeched to a stop at the entrance. The doors flew open, and 3 men in suits rushed out. Not police. Definitely not police. The man in front was older, maybe late 40s, with a scar running down his left cheek that gave him a permanently angry expression. He looked at her, then at the bleeding man, and his eyes went cold. "Who are you?" he barked. "Step away from him." But Yuna didn't move. She kept pressure on the wounds, kept working. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "He needs a hospital now or he dies." The scarred man pulled out a phone, speaking rapidly in low tones. She caught words. Not all of them, but enough to know this was very, very bad. He ended the call and looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. "You're coming with us."
What? No.
"I was just trying to help. You've seen too much. Get in." The other men moved with military precision. They lifted the wounded man carefully, professionally, like they'd done this before. One of them reached for Yuna, and she tried to back away, but there was nowhere to go. "Please, I won't say anything. I'll just forget this happened." Her phone was plucked from her pocket. Her pepper spray disappeared. Strong hands guided her, not roughly but with absolute authority, toward the SUV. She got in because she didn't have a choice. The wounded man was laid across the back seats, his head in her lap. The scarred man sat in front, barking orders to the driver. The SUV tore through Seoul's streets, running red lights, speeding in ways that would definitely get them pulled over if anyone dared. But no one stopped them. Yuna kept pressure on the wounds, kept him alive, because that was all she could do. Her mind raced. Who was this man? Why couldn't she call the police? Who were these people? After what felt like hours but was probably only 15 minutes, the SUV slowed. Massive gates opened automatically. They drove onto a private estate that looked like something out of a movie. The mansion was enormous. Modern architecture. All glass and steel and sharp lines. Security cameras everywhere. Guards patrolling with weapons she tried not to look at too closely. This was Hanamdong, one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in Seoul, where celebrities and business moguls lived behind high walls. This wasn't normal wealth. This was dangerous wealth. They carried the wounded man inside, and Yuna was pulled along. The interior was just as impressive. Marble floors, expensive art, the kind of place that showed up in architecture magazines. But she barely noticed any of it because they were taking him down a hallway, through a door, into a room that made her stop and stare. It was a fully equipped medical facility. Not a first aid kit. An actual medical room with hospital-grade equipment, surgical tools, monitors, everything you'd find in an emergency room. What kind of people had a private hospital in their mansion? They laid him on the medical bed. The scarred man turned to her, and his expression was dead serious. "Save him. If he dies, you die." Yuna's hands started shaking. Not because she didn't know what to do. She'd treated gunshot wounds before. She'd stitched up knife wounds in the ER. She knew exactly what to do. She was shaking because she finally understood. She'd stumbled into something big, something criminal, and these people would absolutely kill her if she failed. So she didn't fail. Her hands steadied. She moved to the sink, scrubbed up, pulled on gloves. The guards watched her every move, but she ignored them. Right now, there was only the patient. She cut away his ruined suit jacket and shirt. The gunshot wound first. She retrieved the bullets with forceps, cleaned the wound, stitched it with steady hands. The stab wound next, deeper than she'd thought, but miraculously it had missed major organs. More stitches. More bandages. 3 hours. It took 3 hours of intense, focused work. 3 hours where one mistake could end both his life and hers. But she didn't make mistakes. Finally, she stepped back. His vital signs were stable. Weak, but stable. He was sedated now, the pain medication she'd administered keeping him under. That's when she finally got a good look at his face. She'd cleaned away the blood, and underneath was a man who was striking. Sharp jawline. High cheekbones. The kind of face that would make people turn and stare on the street. Even unconscious and injured, he had a presence that filled the room. When she'd cut away his shirt, she'd seen the tattoo. A black dragon on his collarbone, intricate and clearly expensive. And scars. So many scars across his chest and arms. This man had survived violence before. Multiple times. He was probably around 30 years old. And he was someone very, very dangerous. The scarred man who'd threatened her earlier approached. His expression had softened slightly, but only slightly. You did well. Now you wait until he wakes. A chair was brought to the corner of the medical room. Yuna sat. Guards positioned themselves outside the door. She could hear them. Heavy footsteps. Low voices. The click of weapons being checked. She tried to think. Tried to plan an escape. But exhaustion was crashing over her in waves. The adrenaline that had kept her going was fading, leaving her hollow and shaking. Who was this man? What had she gotten herself into? Her eyes grew heavy. She fought it, but her body had other ideas. She'd been awake for almost 20 hours, had just performed emergency surgery under threat of death, and she simply couldn't stay conscious anymore. Yuna's head drooped. Her eyes closed. She fell asleep in that chair, in that medical room, in a mansion full of dangerous strangers, with a man who might be a criminal recovering from wounds she'd stitched closed. The last thought she had before sleep claimed her was a question. What happens when he wakes up? She didn't have to wait long to find out. Because in the darkness of that medical room, as Yuna slept in the corner chair, something changed. The man's breathing shifted, became steadier, stronger. And then slowly his eyes opened. Dark eyes. Alert despite the sedation. Eyes that immediately found her sleeping in the corner. He didn't call for the guards. Didn't move. Didn't make a sound. He just watched her, studying her face. The exhaustion written in every line. The cheap clothes. The determination that had made her fight for 3 hours to save a stranger's life. And in those dark, dangerous eyes, something flickered. Something that looked almost like obsession. If you want to know what happens when Yuna wakes up in that mansion and discovers who she really saved, hit that subscribe button right now. This story is just getting started, and trust me, you don't want to miss what comes next. And I have a question for you. If you were in Yuna's position, would you have tried to save him, or would you have run? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. Part 2 drops soon, and everything Yuna thinks she knows is about to be shattered.